Hello, everyone, and welcome to Roots, Routes, and Voices That Shape America, a Cincinnati campus podcast. I'm your host and creator of the series, Clara Matonhodze.
And I'm Bryan Wright, Executive Director of Cincinnati Campus and your co-host. Before we dive in, the views and stories shared on this podcast are those of our guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cincinnati Campus. We believe every voice has a place, especially when it shapes the future of our cities.
Let's get into it. And today we are really thrilled to have Nazly Mamedova with us, an acclaimed immigration attorney whose journey began in a country that no longer exists, if you can believe that. Nazly's story is a powerful testament to the resilience and determination required to build new life in America.
Thanks for joining us, Nazly.
Thank you for having me. I am happy to be here and to talk to you both.
Now, Nazly, we're going to get right into it. Can you tell us about your early experiences growing up? How did those early years shape your understanding of home and belonging?
Yes, absolutely. And my whole story of childhood and growing up is so convoluted. I was born in Soviet Union. Like Clara said, the country that doesn't exist anymore. And I was born in Uzbekistan. And my dad's family is from Azerbaijan. My mom's family is half Crimean, half Turkish. But the reason I was born there is because my family has experienced deportations under the Stalin's rule. So my grandparents from my mom's side have been deported from Georgia and Crimea. And then my dad ended up being in Uzbekistan because his sister moved there studying. But I was born there. Yeah. And, because of all this mix, end up learning several languages. Actually, we spoke 4 at home. And then picked up more and more. And now I'm fluent in 7. So, couple more need to learn, but that's like my retirement project.
That's 7 more than a lot of us know how to speak, Nazly. But can you give us a little geographic journey just to understand between Uzbekistan and the deportations that were happening in Crimea? Like, I'm trying to figure out where were they being deported from and to where? Can you give us a little geographic lesson around that area of the world?
Absolutely. So during Soviet Union, under Stalin's rule, a lot of people, including Stalin.
Which period are we? This is like in the...
We're talking 40s.
40s,
So before and during the World War II.
Okay.
And Stalin was paranoid a lot. So he looked at those minority groups, right? And he was like, I'm going to deport them all and resettle them in different places so they don't present a danger anymore. And it was very much of an ethnic cleansing and genocide that was actually created. But they took, for example, with Crimean Tatars, they took over 600,000 people, and put them in the wagons overnight in the trains and deported them out. A lot of people died during that time, and they sent them out to Central Asia and resettled them there. Similar thing happened with Meskheti Turks, who were Turks and Muslims, but they were living on the territory of nowadays Georgia.
Okay.
And this one was even more terrible in terms of when this happened. This happened during winter in November. So a lot of people overnight again in the trains, because this was the schemes that they did, right? So in the trains, deported, also resettled in Central Asia. And so many died because they simply froze to death. So really horrific ways of how my family members ended up in Uzbekistan. But both grandparents became doctors, and mom was born in Uzbekistan, and then my mom met my dad, and yeah, I was born there.
So these were ethnicities that Stalin decided, but they were otherwise Russian, but maybe a smaller ethnic minority, and I'm trying to understand, and I'm sure most people who
I
want to know, like,
understand.
are these people who had come from somewhere to settle in Russia, and now we are deporting them back, or these are people that were Russians, but maybe they just didn't come from the dominant Russian culture?
So it wasn't really like that. It was a little bit different because at that time it wasn't like Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, separate countries really. It was all of the Soviet Union, right? It was 15 states in it. And the ethnic groups that were deported weren't necessarily Russian. It was, so there's a difference when you look at the post-Soviet Union. There's nationality, your nationality and your citizenship are very different things. Where here, a lot of times now as an immigration attorney, we fill out immigration paperwork and it says your nationality, right? And in the United States, we mean your citizenship,
Right.
but not your ethnic group. And there, it's every country had several ethnicities, right? Or several people from different ethnicities. And it was very different in terms of terminology of what it meant to be a national or a citizen of a certain country.
Wow.
So you had mentioned that your parents studied to become doctors in Uzbekistan. Grandparents. And then you mentioned in your household that you spoke 4 languages,
Yes.
right? And now speak 7. So I have 2 questions. One, I'm curious of what those languages are, and how was that, often in multilingual homes, there's negotiation between 2 languages. So when you multiply that to 4 languages, how did that negotiation happen and just easily flow between the 4? And so just curious about, the number of languages and which ones, and how did you navigate that in the household?
Absolutely. So I guess it helped that some of those languages were from the same language groups, right? So we spoke Crimean Tatar, we spoke Azerbaijani, we spoke Uzbek and Russian. And Uzbek, Crimean Tatar, and Azerbaijani are from the same Turkic language group. So that's made it easier. And then once you were in the post-Soviet Union, right? In whatever country you were, in whatever state you were, they would have their own language, right? In Uzbekistan was Uzbek. And then everyone had to learn Russian in schools because that was like a major language, right? Soviet Union. And then you had your own languages that you spoke at home. And that's how I ended up growing up with 4.
And then what were the other 3 that you've added since?
Turkish, which is very similar to Azerbaijani and Crimean Tatar. And then I speak Spanish and then English.
Do you ever mix the languages up? I know me being bilingual, there are a lot of times that I kind of mix the languages. Bryan, I've probably done it with you, but you've never noticed because it's very, it's usually like with the connecting words between sentences that I notice I sometimes revert back to the connecting words of Shona, which is the other language that I speak. Does that ever happen to you?
Yes, but what I've noticed happens more to me is that now I use the words that are simpler. So if something to say is easier in Spanish, I sometimes would basically swap the word for another, like, out of the other language. And sometimes I don't make sense to people, but I'll be like, saying da, 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 yes, because da is shorter and easier, And agua is easier and shorter to say instead of word water. So like, depending who I talk to, I might like use borrow and use the simpler words out of other languages.
That happens to me too.
And it's kind of actually like great because like helps with communication and flow, but it also can be very confusing.
Yes, so to whoever is listening, it's like, what did you say? I'm like, oh.
But I see it can be very, and we'll get into this, later on, but it just seems like in building trusting relationships with your clients and the community members you work with, being able to speak multiple languages helps you with that outreach to multiple communities and thinking, obviously there's a large Spanish-speaking community here, a large community from Uzbekistan as well, and also Russian-speaking. So it just seems like it builds that trust with the community members you're working with.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I forgot to mention, but one of the languages I know also Ukrainian. I lived actually in Crimea, went to school there, and learned the language in school. And with everything that happened with Ukraine and the community coming here, it was so instrumental to be able to speak it and help the community to, just adapt, because they came running away from the war that and Russian invasions that started. So a lot of them had very little or no English. So it was very important for them to be able to find someone who could help them, who spoke the language.
That's so meaningful. And just, I mean, we've talked about this before, but just how, like, it's always interesting how we all end up in Cincinnati, right? I never thought I would end up in Cincinnati.
Yes.
And here we are. And so, and then either by force or by choice, and just either way, but to find someone that can share a lived experience, share a language, that's really powerful and meaningful.
Yeah. So how did you end up in Cincinnati, Nazly? So when did the conversation about potentially moving to the U.S.? I'm assuming you moved to the U.S., or did you hit some stops along the way elsewhere?
Yeah, I blame my mother.
You blame your mom?
That's how I ended up in Cincinnati. And there's a thing about Cincinnati, right? Like Bryan was saying, you come here, you get stuck here.
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
now,
Not your choice, it draws you in.
hey, I love Cincinnati.
Same.
Now
Yeah.
Cincinnati's home. I've lived here more than anywhere else in the world. So I've been here for over 20 years, and I came here because of my mom, and I ended up going to Xavier. I've studied ESL program first year, and then Xavier gave me a grant to study my bachelor's. So I stayed, did that.
What was your major?
International affairs.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That's my minor.
At some point, I knew I want to become a lawyer because my mom used to volunteer me to interpret in the community. She's like, "Oh, my daughter speaks English." She'll translate, and she would be like, "Go help," and I'm like, "Okay." So at some point, I knew I want to be an attorney, but then also mom's side of the family all been doctors except her, and my grandparents were like, "Please be a doctor." And I was like, I can be a Juris Doctor. So
Clever.
yeah, went to law school, and going back to languages, I feel like that's one of the things that differentiates me from many other immigration attorneys, is that like ability to connect with my clients, their culture, and ability to understand the nuances that are sometimes so important, especially when you represent clients in immigration court.
That is so true.
And a lot of times you see clearly that your judge and your prosecutor or DHS attorney do not understand and do not connect what your client is trying to testify about. And so really is cultural and language barrier.
Yeah.
And not that your client is trying to lie to the court.
Right. Yes.
So being able to understand that and see that, or even sometimes to hear that interpreter might be misinterpreting, because no one else would know unless you spoke the language. And those kind of things are very important, and sometimes have huge effect on your client's case and the outcomes.
But I think that's, I mean, you touch on, there's so much there, but the fact that you saw that, your lived experience in growing up and the multiple languages, the multiple places that you lived, the multiple homes, not everyone would see that. It's your experience, your training that allowed you to be able to see that. And that's really important and crucial, right? And it has an impact, not just from an empathic community building relationship piece, but it could shift the direction of their case in a meaningful way, right? That's
Yeah. I wonder in that spirit, Nazly, whether was there anything that that was deeply personal that influenced your decision to say, this is the type of law I want to practice? Because immigration law is really heartbreaking. I mean, I always think of it as very bipolar, right? So you have highs when someone's case is successful. It's like the happiest day of their lives. Like now you can be in America, or it could be the most heartbreaking when the denial comes. So is there a story behind you deciding to say, okay, I will do immigration law, or what influenced your decision?
Yes. So as I said earlier, my mom was kind of volunteering me in the community, and what I saw in our like state court systems is how a lot of times inability to speak English for people actually ended up messing up their due process rights, right? Yes. And they weren't getting things that they might have gotten, like even like deals, right? Or some other things, conviction dismissed, as if they would have spoken English, as if they knew about their rights and maybe like hiring an attorney, you know. So I saw all this happening. Also, there's an interesting theory, and I'm kind of like, oh, it makes sense to me now, that people have a genetic code and there's something in them that comes generationally. And we have like in our family, my grandfather and his brothers who like fought for human rights when Stalin deported Crimean Tatars. You know, my grandfather's brother was actually imprisoned and he was protesting and like was starving and trying to make sure that Crimean Tatars go back to Crimea. So we have like a lot of history in the family where family was very politically active and participating and very much struggling but fighting for the human rights. And I think that's kind of like instilled in me as a person, and I'm always like trying to protect people's human rights.
So maybe not the genetic coding, but it's the stories that are being passed down through the generations that you grow up listening to, you know. And then when you're older, I know there are a lot of stories in my family about things that now only start to make sense, right? And it's like, oh, my family's been right all along. So maybe that's the same thing with you. It's the stories that you grew up hearing about what happened to your family and what's happening, and then that ultimately influences, you know, who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like we maybe don't understand that as children, right?
No, we don't. Oh
but
my
then
gosh,
with age, you're starting to analyze this. And as you gain more knowledge, you look at things differently. Sometimes I go back and I think about books I read as a child. And now I'm like, oh my God, I need to reread it because it will be totally different.
Right.
So I was a kid growing up in post-Soviet Union, right? I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it was, you know, a story. But then I came here, learned more about history of the United States, and looked at this book
very differently.
Very different.
Right.
Yes, I totally get that. Especially these days, I have started reading a lot of the books that I read when I was a child. I think for comfort. But you start realizing like, oh my gosh, this book has a totally different meaning. And now I will admit, okay, so I'm going to admit to this, because apparently romance is back now, right? With like middle-aged women. They're reading a lot of romance novels. So there's this series called the Calder series from Janet Daly. She's kind of like Danielle Steele, lots of romance novels. And I remember when I was in high school, I read all the series and I just thought they were the greatest love story. I was in love with Montana. I wanted to go and live in Montana, and here I am in Zimbabwe. And because that was the setting, you know. And so I started rereading that series, and I just cannot identify with it. I'm like, what was I? Yeah, it just seems very otherworldly. Like, I don't know what I identified in these novels at that young age, but so I get the rereading of books and totally different perspective once you start reading them again.
Absolutely. We recently had a conversation in our office. We were like, oh my God, 8th grade, and we were reading Dostoevsky, and like and teachers were expecting us to analyze that, or War and Peace, which is like, and I'm like, how? And now, like, going back, rereading it, it's so different. I agree.
It's very different. Yeah.
So I feel like I need to go back and read Crime and Punishment, and as an adult, and
Crime and Punishment. Well, a couple of years ago, I reread Anna Karenina, you know, and it wasn't as daunting. And I'm like, why why was this book supposed to be a very difficult book? At least at the time that I first read it, it was supposed to be an extremely difficult book. And I remember thinking that. But now I'm like, it's just a romantic love story, it feels like. But,
Yeah, it was suicide.
It's like as we get older, things get simpler, but also I feel like they get more complicated. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a range. It's a range.
So when you finished, well, one thing it's interesting you mentioned Uncle Tom's Cabin as a book written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, who also has a house in Cincinnati, and it's just making that Cincinnati connection is interesting.
Yeah,
I mean it's nothing deeper than that, but it's just funny how that Cincinnati connection happens.
But I also live in West End, so like that whole area, the Underground Railroads, like, oh my God, there's so much connection. And it's so interesting, Cincinnati, like I think about this all the time. We actually have so much history here and so many connections. And there's so many Hollywood movies where Cincinnati pops up. That's like
randomly.
Like, oh, we know Cincinnati. I'm like, how? They're like, yeah, we've heard about it from like all over the world, So we're small but mighty.
I love it. Yeah. And we talked about earlier that none of us are from here, and like we love it and sing its praises and such. And increasingly there's more and more films coming out that were filmed in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
We might have the Sundance Film Festival here, and it's really growing. I moved here in 2008, and so just even from that time and how it's evolved, it's been just wonderful to see the changes and growth of it. So
it's a very different city now. I came here early 2000s, and when I first came to Cincinnati, I always intended, like, my port of entry was Philadelphia, but came here for school, and because Philadelphia was very expensive, and the intention was I'm just gonna go to Cincinnati, go to NKU because it's extremely cheap, and then go back, right? And I've never left Cincinnati.
Have you guys seen a mural right next to the casino when you drive into the city, and it says something about like leaving no matter where we are in the world, but our hearts remain in Cincinnati? And I feel like this is so
seen that. Where is that mural? I haven't seen
it's right across from the casino. So but it's like so representative of Cincinnati.
Nice.
No,
beautiful.
that's great.
Beautiful.
So when you went to Xavier, went to law school, when you completed law school, did you jump into your own firm? Did you work in another practice? And tell us about that journey.
So while I was in law school, I was doing a lot of internships, like starting my first year, I interned with Kentucky Refugee Ministries. And then I interned with Alex's office, who was at that time Lubens Otto, who was at the time a private practitioner, but then became director, right? Not director, but like lead attorney at the Immigrant Refugee Law Center.
Right.
So, and then I interned with Judge Black, who, like, I'm seriously so thankful to these days that he gave me that opportunity, because to get a judicial internships was very hard, and him like taking on me was amazing opportunities that he gave me that some other people might have not. And interned at some other local law firms, and including OJPC. So we were talking about that earlier. Yeah, so Tyra, like, I worked on her case actually, and I was joking earlier, but not really joking. Like, I remember driving with another not classmates, with another intern, right, to Dayton to try to get the documents signed, for her case when we were working on her release. And then with all that, I had already of enough experience where I was able to actually join another private practitioner as an of counsel. So I work with Charleston Wong, and for, I want to say, about three or 4 years. And after that, I went completely on my own.
So going on your own, that is, I mean, I think of like the entrepreneurial mind, right? And so that's quite a leap, right? To want to go out on your own practice. Was that always the plan, or was there? Yeah, what was that process like to go from working with someone else to then taking a leap and starting your own practice?
So I wouldn't say it was always a plan, but it became a plan as a necessity to improve the services for my clients. So I just wanted, and hopefully I'm still am, but I just want to be like more out there and use and utilize the newer things that we have available to us as tools in immigration law. Immigration law changes on daily basis. So there's so much happening. And now with like use of AI, as we were talking earlier, right? There's so many new tools and other things that we can do. And it's interesting, but a lot of law firms, just in general, like legal field, right, is very conservative and kind of holds back. And I'm trying to be more progressive out there. Yeah. And just besides like using tools, for example, my law firm this year, we switched to 4 work days for our employees. Oh, nice. Right? Instead of 5 days. So they still get paid for 5, right? But we work 4 days because I want them to have like an extra day off, because there is a research that, you know, if they have this like extra weekday off where they can go do their doctor's appointments and other things, your employees actually become more productive.
They're more productive and healthier and happier.
And there's so much research on that I was like, hey, someone really smart went and looked at it. So let me try this, you know.
How's that working out?
My employees are very happy. So, awesome. And I love my employees. So, and I want everyone to be happy.
You mean trusting research and data and science? That's amazing.
Well, thank God Nazly does.
You know, you talked about wanting to be, you know, helpful for your clients and such. And obviously, I mean, you've given a few examples of, because of your, you know, your experience, the languages you speak and relating, you're getting recognition. I mean, we are talking to a recipient of the best attorney of the year. And so does that recognition or receiving the award, and, you know, does that help, you know, it's like Clara mentioned, it's really, immigration law as a practice can be very sad, but it also can be very rewarding. I mean, I imagine there's stories there too. So I have a follow-up question for that. But with this recognition, I mean, does that help motivate you? Is that something just, it's nice, but you're focused on other things? Yeah.
It's nice, but I think the bigger recognition comes from my clients. So I think this is very fitting example. Yesterday, the whole morning I spent in a Boone County jail, actually very sad. Like one of the clients got arrested. We went to visit her. She was crying. We were crying. We came back and called her husband, told him kind of summary of what we went through. My clerk was crying, telling that to the husband. Husband was crying on the phone, you know, very devastating moment. And then in the afternoon, another person came, who is our client, who I know since she was a child.
Oh, wow.
And she got her green card. So
oh, my God.
That's great.
It was like celebratory thing, right? We took the picture. She brought us cookies. She thanked us so many times, because at the time when we started her process, her father actually didn't believe into the process and didn't really want to go with it. And me and another clerk, we pushed for it. We said, no, you need to do this. This is very important for the future of your daughter, you know. And then she comes back and saying, thank you so much. Thank you so much for like doing this for me, because if you didn't push at that time, we would have never done it. My dad would have been just whatever. And not because he didn't want to help a child, right? But his trust, also little of knowledge. And she was like, I'm so thankful. And I was like, you know what? I always believed in you, like that this would happen. And it's amazing. Like now she's a legal permanent resident. She is a very, very like great person and also contributing member to our community. She works and she now has her own child. So it's and there is so many stories like this.
High and a low.
Yes.
In one day, yeah.
And there's so many stories like that. And some people like we've serviced like families in several generations, applying for green cards, citizenships, like marriages, fiancé visas, and things like that. And you see those like families grow, and you know that you are contributing to this family's well-being. This is probably the biggest recognition that like is also very motivating to us.
Right. I'm so glad you shared that, because it's so important to remember that, yes, it is. You can just get so weighted down with, the communities are being attacked, and it's, and feeling the daily stresses of it. But through your work, yes, there is that kind of, you're an attorney. You provide that technical assistance and navigation of immigration law, but you also bring hope to people and joy. You hope of that there is some kind of relief or pathway, but also bringing joy when someone comes to you that you've seen grow up and say, here's my green card. Thank you for this. And that's a wonderful place to be in, and reminding that at times. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I always say I am so lucky because I actually have a job that I love and enjoy. And I know that a lot of people can say that about their jobs.
Yeah.
But I am so lucky that this is very like also fulfilling area of law where you get to actually help people and see the impact of your actions.
Yeah. So on that note, Nazly, we are going to continue with our conversation. When we get back, we're going to take a break for now.
You are listening to Roots, Routes, and Voices, a Cincinnati Compass podcast. This podcast was funded in part by a grant from the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale Jr. Foundation. Thank you for your support in helping us to share stories that make up our beautiful region, but often go unheard. Welcome back to Roots, Routes, and Voices that Shape America. If you're just joining us, we're continuing our conversation with Nazly Mamedova and her experience immigrating to America and establishing roots in Cincinnati.
This has been such a wonderful conversation so far, Nazly. And, having gone through some of the immigration system myself, I'm really having a lot of aha moments here. So let's continue with some of your experience. What has been one of the most significant barriers that your clients face when they're integrating into American society?
Oh, it's so different for every group, right?
Yeah.
America is a country of immigrants. And when we talk about immigrants, we talk about so many different groups of immigrants. We're talking about different socioeconomic levels, different levels of education, or maybe skills, right, and trades that they've learned. So I feel like every group has their own barriers that they face. But in general, from what I hear from people a lot, and what makes us so great is that people find America welcoming. And this is so interesting because you sometimes show up in immigration court and knowing the issues our country has, you see these people saying, immigration judge, let me stay in America because this is the best place and safest place for me. And that makes you think of, oh my God, where did they come from? What experiences they've had, right?
Yeah.
And as I said, it's amazing, but America is welcoming.
It is very welcoming.
And
yes. Yeah.
I think we need to make sure we do not lose this ability of continually welcoming the immigrants.
Yeah. America is extremely welcoming. I just talking about that, I have this vivid memory when I first came to the U.S. of, NPR, when they do the drives where you send money. Like, I remember going, are they crazy? Like, who do they think is going to give money? And but they're not realizing how generous at the time that Americans are. And here, this radio station year after year, that actually how it fundraised. But at the time, I just thought it was such a foreign idea to me. Like, you just randomly send money to some place that you don't know, and this is how this business exists. And I think nothing encompasses the welcoming and trustfulness or trustworthiness, or, that NPR. It just sums up everything that's great and good about about the American spirit,
Absolutely, and I'm going to actually talk to this. This is so funny. I volunteered for several years with a local organization here in Cincinnati, Give Back Cincinnati, and we had a Give Back Beyond Cincinnati, where we went on trips outside of the country, right, to other countries and do the builds. So you have to pay for your trip. You have to pay for the materials, you have to pay for your flight, and then some administrative fees to go then and volunteer and work in another country to build houses, to put the cinder blocks together, to learn how to use a chainsaw and some other things. So people in those communities, in those countries were like, those crazy Americans,
they
pay to come do it. And this is such an American thing, and such an American value of giving and giving back. So I'm also on the board of the Red Cross here locally, and this whole idea of giving is a very much American traits that we carry. So, and yes, I totally emphasize with you in terms of some people were like crazy people, right? Why would you spend money on it to come
do menial labor at that too, right? But what barriers do you think immigrants face? Like, I know you did say that it all depends on different communities, but is there a single barrier that kind of runs across the different communities in terms of integration?
Yes, most of the time it is a language. So
language, okay.
Ability to speak English and not just speaking it, because a lot of times we see people learn quickly to speak it, but then also understand it completely, right? There's still barriers with that, and I feel like a lot of people face it all the time. We now have interns who are LLM students from UC and who are attorneys in their countries, and they have excellent English, and it's still the barriers that they face now in preparation, for example, for the bar exam, right? So even highest educated levels of immigrants that we see, right, still language is number one barrier.
It's definitely language.
Sorry, what do you think? Just for their listeners, LLM, what does that mean?
It's a master's in law, master's in legal studies. They say.
Oh my God! For some reason, I was thinking large language model.
Different industry.
So
overlapping.
Totally different industry. But yes, language is a barrier. I have often been told by friends that I know who are in really high positions about the experience even in corporate America, where they go, when everybody starts talking about references to movies, I don't get it. I don't get the sarcasm, I don't get the reference to what movies are saying are business, and this is at a really high level. So language does go through, I think, across the range of difficulties in integration. So in that vein about challenges and misconceptions, what is the biggest misconception, in your opinion, do you think Americans have about immigrants?
So, oh my God, so many misconceptions, but I will start with the common one. Oh, immigrants are coming to this country to take our jobs. They're coming here illegally, right? We hear this all the time. And I feel like people say this without going anywhere deeper into looking of why they're saying this, where it's coming from, and what do you mean by saying, we use word undocumented, but a lot of times they use illegal term, right? So it's who do you mean? Because anyone who was here legally and documented in a bat of an eye can become undocumented. So it's so easy to lose your status. For example, there has been a push from the current administration. Well, they already stopped the temporary protected status for several countries, right? Haiti, Venezuela, and now push for Ukrainians too. So this is people who entered the United States legally, documented, right? Have work permits, social securities, contributing members of our community.
Yeah.
And then with one executive order, they are gonna become, the word they use, right? Illegals.
Illegal, yeah.
So a lot of times, I think the biggest misconception is that people don't know how complicated immigration system is. And I just taught actually 3-hour class at Ollie at UC, and all 3 hours were spent on basically explaining the myth about immigrations.
Yeah.
So, and answering the questions of people they had. They were like, oh, if you marry to Americans, that's it. You get green card, you get citizenship,
yeah.
all these things. And I'm like, nope, that is not how it works.
It's not that easy.
It's so complicated,
Yeah.
and there's so many other things that are in the play.
Yeah.
And it just, people who've never actually dealt with it and never looked at it, they think it's very easy.
Yeah.
And this is like biggest misconceptions that we have. It's so interesting. So going back to Ukrainians now, I have a really good friend of mine who's Ukrainian and who's on U4U here. And now with everything happening, a lot of moms in school of her child are like, what can we do? How can we support you? How can we make sure you guys stay here, right? We don't want our children to lose their classmate, and your family. So a lot of them are trying to advocate, but we're trying to help them and educate them because a lot of them don't know anything about immigration or how it works. And normally is the first thing where I send people, like, go talk to your representatives. It's important. So tell them about things that are important to you. And they do represent you, so they have to listen to you.
Yeah, I was. You kind of anticipate what I was going to ask you around what communities can do to work together to better understand and support the systems, and you've kind of touched on it already. One, it's just starting with education, because there are a lot of strong opinions about immigration as a practice and as a system of laws, and I think people don't necessarily understand them, or you hear misconceptions of, oh, just get in line. Well, which line? There are not really lines, and if there are, they're very long, and there's, and you've touched on this around education, but what are some other things that communities can do to work together to help build better understanding and support systems of newcomers and immigrants?
Yeah. So right now, specifically with everything that's happening in immigration field, I think supporting each other, protecting each other is very important for the communities, because there has been so much enforcement and detention happening since the new administration came to power, and people are just scared. They live in fear. People are scared to send their children to schools. People are scared to show up to work and seek any help from the police, right? Or seek medical help. Everyone lives in fear. So being there for your neighbors, co-workers who are immigrants, right? And supporting them, giving maybe a right to someone can make a huge difference in their lives nowadays. So I think the biggest thing we can do is have both business community, nonprofits, and then individuals come together and say, our immigrant communities are important for us. They drive our economy, they are integrated into our societies, and we are going to protect them. Because what the federal government is pushing right now is a lot of times very much compared to what the Nazis did with Jews, right? The registration system that USCIS is pushing, the system where you can call and report, like they say, illegal aliens, all this is starting to remind us of the divide that is being created of them and us, and creating a fear of them. So I feel like this is also part of our history, right? In the US, we always had throughout the years, depending on which area you look at, that boogeyman, right? At some point, it was Chinese, right? And we had Chinese Exclusion Act. Then it was Japanese, and we had those internment camps. And then it was, Mexicans at some point, and then it was Muslims, right? The Muslim ban, 9/11. So
there's always
now it's immigrants. And creating the situation where we control people with fear of that other is what our government is doing. And I think this is the biggest thing we need to fight, and we need to be united in fighting it.
Right. No, I think you're right. And you mentioned earlier about how there are still large communities that are quite welcoming and leaning on them. So I think it's with troubled waters, there are communities that are coming together to help support. So I think in just one, because we are getting close to time, I have one question that, if you were writing your own immigrant story, what would the title be and why?
Okay, this is so cheesy, and everyone uses it, right? But I feel like everyone who comes to America, right, is living or trying to live the American dream. And I have such a faith in American people, because for every bad thing that I see in the news nowadays, I see 20 other groups that are ready to fight it, that are there to stand up and to protect others' rights. So it makes America really great, and no matter what the others say.
Well said, an immigrant, Nazly. Forever with the right spirit, right? And appreciation for what America is.
Absolutely, because as I said, we have our own issues. As an attorney, I'm very well aware of our own issues. Within being an immigrant myself, I'm very aware of our issues. But at the end of the day, a lot of people find this country to be the best.
Yes.
And we need to make sure we remain the best. And welcoming others is a way we remain the best. So I don't know what I would name it, but something about probably living the American dream, and being able to stand up for others when they can't. So something along those lines.
To everyone at home, we appreciate you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Roots, Routes, and Voices That Shape America wherever you stream your podcast. Visit www.cincinnaticompass.org to sign up for our newsletter and stay connected about upcoming community events.
Our producers are Asia Mishu and Jane Wendy. Sound engineering and mixing provided by Hardcast Media. On-site engineers Peter and Audrey, and 1127 Media. A very special thank you to the Forest Park branch of Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library for hosting, and to the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale Jr. Foundation for sponsoring our podcast. I'm your host, Clara Matonhodze. Thanks for listening.